Hi, I'm Jamie.
And I'm Stacey.
And this is the Body Smart Podcast.
And if you've ever wondered if your hormones are to blame for all of your struggles, then this is the episode for you. We have the amazing Annice Mukherjee with us today, who is also known as the Hormone.doc. And she is a huge champion for women's health and well-being, really knows her stuff. She is an endocrinologist, and we just had to get her on the podcast. So not only does she kind of do her day job, she's also an honorary professor at the Coventry University. She's written a book, The Complete Guide to the Menopause. She's on the British Menopause Society Medical Advisory Council. She's working on a new course with UCL for educating women around menopause. So she's literally the go-to woman here. And she has delighted us with her presence. So a lot gets blamed on hormones, not just menopause, which is another reason we wanted to speak to yourself, Annice, because you have got a background in the science of endocrinology, which obviously you understand the bigger picture. But it's like weight loss, menopause, stress. These all get thrown around as hormones being the issue. And whilst they have a big impact, that's not necessarily the whole story. So I'd love you to kind of list out which hormones you feel get a bad rap and why.
I think they all do. I mean, I deal with the whole what we call a hormone orchestra, because you've got a lot of the hormones start off in the brain and they cascade through the body. And so the brain hormones link with the thyroid gland, which controls the metabolism of your body, which is the rate at which you sort of burn calories, and you know, it's all about your energy. And then there's the adrenal glands, which produce your fight or flight response, control your blood pressure and also your stress response, and that gets blamed for a lot, but I think that's probably justified in today's world. And then reproductive hormones in men and women. And the thing about women from puberty onwards to menopause is that every single day of every month, a woman's reproductive hormones are a moving target. And if you think that's happening, so, you know, every single day, estrogen, progesterone, and the brain hormones that control the reproductive hormones are moving, but they all interact with all the other hormones. Stress hormones impact on female hormones. The thyroid hormone impacts all the other hormones in the body, of which there's about 70 that, you know, we could go into impact. The pancreas, insulin, and many brain hormones that control appetite and weight impact. And so I'd love to make it sound simple, but it is quite complicated. And that's why in my career that spans over 30 years, you know, there are no two women the same who've come to see me with the same problem. So people come to see me with the same problem title, hormone problems, premenstrual disorders, perimenopause, menopause, thyroid problems, adrenal problems. But no two women are the same, because if you add all of those layers in, there's an infinite number of outcomes. And also what's going on outside the body in your world also impacts.
What do you see as like some of the main problems that people bring to you then? Like, what is the like a top 5 to an extent?
Yeah, so I see a lot of women with what we sort of call premenstrual disorders. So many of your listeners will have heard of premenstrual tension or premenstrual syndrome, which are the symptoms that come around generally the few days or couple of weeks before the period starts. And a lot of women will say there are certain times in the month they feel much better, and certain times in the month where they, you know, can burst into tears for no reason, or, you know, be very bloated, or just all sorts of symptoms. So, and when that becomes more severe, there's a form called premenstrual dysphoric disorder. So premenstrual syndrome itself is really common. Probably 70 to 80% of women will experience it. Premenstrual dysphoric disorder.
Is this PMDD?
PMDD is fortunately less common, but can be really severe and affect mood.
We've both coached ladies with that.
Yeah, and it's your heart goes out to them. You feel for them. It's almost like half of the month, every month, they are in this state of just doubting themselves, negativity, can't rationalize anything, and then it's almost as soon as they come out of it, just this weight just lifts and they feel like they're back to normal. But it's like 2 out of every 4 weeks, at least for the ladies that I've worked with, and it's horrible to see them like suffer so much, to be honest.
It really is. And the worst thing is there's so little research in these disorders because they are literally hormone imbalances. if it was as easy as, well, this hormone's low, so we'll treat it and then it'll all be fine, that would be easy. And there's very little research in this area. So I've managed, with using the best evidence we have, women with the most severe forms. And it's not just mood. So there's something that we describe as catamenial syndromes, which catamenial means in relation to the menstrual cycle. So it's not just mood, which is the PMDD. You can get worsening of symptoms of asthma that link with the menstrual cycle, with epilepsy, with other health issues. And so it's absolutely real, but there isn't a test for it. And that's a real big problem. And there is some research, but all the research shows that, certain medications help some women and not others. Actually, pretty much all the research around says that implementing positive lifestyle change can help, but it can be really difficult when you're struggling with that severity of symptoms.
Is it genetic, like PMDD, or like is there a cause or a root cause to it?
We really don't understand it very well. It's not known to be genetic, but there are often hormone problems tend to run in families. They often do run in families. But there's often other factors. Lifestyle can be a factor. Stress is a big factor. And the way we experience stress in today's world is completely different to 30 years ago anyway. So a woman might ask her mother and say, did you have this? But her mother's life was going to be very different to how we live our lives today.
Could you explain that a little bit more? Like, why do you see the stress 30 years ago to today? Like, what's the main differences?
This is a big part of what I do, actually, because it impacts on everything. And we could go into the other hormone problems that I deal with, thyroid, menopause. But the way stress manifests in today's world is fundamentally different from 30 years ago. So I call it a paradigm shift, a fundamental change. So our bodies are programmed to cope with, body clocks controlling our time of day. So going to bed at certain times, getting up at certain times. And that's not just your sleep hormones, melatonin, the cortisol, which is the biggest, most sort of powerful stress hormone because it's quite long acting, lasts about 6 hours in your body. It's very high in the morning when you're fit and well. Yep. It reaches a very low level at midnight, and that helps you sleep because it's a wake hormone, it's your stress hormone. So it should be very high in the morning, very low at night. The way we lived 30 years ago, shops were open 9 to 5. I mean, people can't remember this. There was no social media, There
was no phones,
weekends,
no mobiles. Yeah.
Weekends were people rested. We weren't so connected with the world.
Even 15 years ago, I think.
Yeah. So since sort of the dawn of, the World Wide Web and everybody living 24/7 lifestyles, it's not been that long. And what happens is, we're stressed at midnight when we're looking at something on our phone, or the blue light on all the devices that we look at sort of delays melatonin response. It's actually stimulating and can raise your cortisol. So if your cortisol level is high at night, it stops you sleeping. That's a whole nother part of hormone problems as well. So, and cortisol, unfortunately, I sort of describe it as it trumps healthy hormones. So cortisol tends to suppress estrogen, testosterone, progesterone. It's complicated. I want to simplify it, but I also want to keep it accurate. So when we have stress day in, day out, we're looking at things at night, we're not sleeping as well. And of course, many people don't do exercise. Nutrition is not great. So if you're eating lots of ultra processed foods, I mean, you guys are you're big on nutrition, so I don't want to, talk too much about that, but a lot of ultra processed foods, you get these peaks in glucose in your blood afterwards, and you can get the crashes, so you can get sort of sugar crashes that makes your energy worse, so everybody's tired. I'm trying to paint a picture of the fact that what happens is your body feels like it's under stress 24 hours a day. Yeah. And when stress becomes chronic, it's not working for us, it's working against us. And we understand that scientifically, and it's been a field of research since the 1970s, but it's really escalating because of the way we live our lives. It's called allostatic load. And that type of chronic stress increases the risk of high blood pressure, it increases the risk of diabetes, obesity, cardiovascular disease, the common cancers like the environmental cancers, breast and colon cancer and others, dementia and osteoporosis, brittle bones. Chronic stress over decades is the biggest threat, I think, to our modern lifestyles and worlds.
It's also a reflection of modern day society, though, because everything that you've just mentioned, whether it's the convenience of food and fast food and highly palatable foods, or people feel like they've not got time, so they always eating out for lunch, whether that's being addicted to the phones and social media and being on them really late and then getting poor sleep, people not exercising or being as active. It's all connected as a whole and then having a knock-on effect on people's overall stress levels.
I think it's peaking now because we're in a phase over the last decade or so where people have lived these lives and they've not really been aware of how much that sort of environment is really toxic to health.
Doesn't it?
And it takes time. So, and I see a lot of younger women and they'll say, I'm fine, I don't have any health issues. I might be seeing them for, something different. But then I'll see that they're eating poor diets, drinking too much alcohol, not paying attention to good sleep habits, having a lot of stress, all sorts of things which, you know about. And I'll say, well, look, you can run on adrenaline now for a while and you might say you feel fine. And it's men as well, it's not just women. But the consequences happen later. In women, if you're all right during your 20s and 30s, that's fine. But then, unfortunately, menopause does hit. And if you've got a sort of an overdraft of poor sort of strategies to look after your health, it can hit very hard in midlife.
That's a great way of putting it, actually. Like, start putting your savings in now rather than drawing out your whole
and it's an investment. It's an investment in your health. And not only that, the things that we need to do to make ourselves feel better and invest in our health, it's sort of a no-brainer really once you can get your head around it. But I think we're creatures of instinct and we kind of do what we have to do. Yeah.
A lot of the things that we talk about often is it's comfortable to keep as the status quo, even if you don't really know. Like, you should do X, Y, Z. If you have a habit of doing late nights, easy food, having a glass of wine, it's very comfortable. And it needs sometimes something bad to happen to push you to make a change.
It's that very much that like easy now, hard later, or like hard now, easy later to an extent, and challenge yourself to do more of those like difficult things like showing up and exercising when you maybe don't want to, yes, not watching that extra episode of Netflix, but knowing a good night's sleep is going to serve you so much more the next day, and making all those small decisions in the here and now, because they actually become your life to an extent.
Well, what is good for you is often a bit counterintuitive. And I always talk to my patients because, yes, a lot of people come to me when things have gone wrong. And then I go, okay, this is what we need to think about. And then they go, right, yeah, I'm listening now. I'm listening. So we are controlled by our instincts. And that comes from the limbic center in our brain, a particular area called the amygdala, which is our emotional sensing center. Mm-hmm. And that emotional center it's there supposedly to protect us. It's like to warn us about if there's stress or if there's, trouble coming. And our limbic system wants us to not starve because our ancestors either starved to death or because that's,
It's a very new problem, isn't it? To have food in like, I think it just come out in the news about a week or two ago that there's more people now dying from being overweight and obese than there is from being underweight. So it's like a bit of a tipping point in society and the world. But it's a very new problem. Like, 100 years ago, food wasn't in abundance the way it is now. And that's sort of like you said about the social media and the stress that we're living in the past 30 years. A lot of these problems are very new, and our bodies aren't necessarily, our minds aren't built for that or haven't adapted to that yet.
No, our genes come from our ancestors. Our ancestors survived war and famine. So when there's stress, our brain says, there's going to be war, and it puts our stress levels up, our cortisol levels. But the war doesn't come. It's just every day it's stressful. And also, we've got plentiful food, and our limbic system saying, oh, look at all this fantastic food, eat it, because you never know when famine's coming. And if famine doesn't come, or war is coming to the world, but, if we're not in that situation, the way our instincts sort of rule us, it is detrimental to our health. So what you have to do, because it's like we're creatures of habit. We want to stay in a warm, safe environment. We want to sleep as much as we can if we're tired. We want to eat as much good quality food. If there's bad news, our stress levels are high. And so in order to make those changes, you have to override that emotional center with your frontal lobe, which is your logical brain. And who's got time to be thinking about that?
Yeah.
People don't. We will have to. I think people who, over the next 20 years are going to do well with their health. They're going to be those people who are conscious about this.
There's a great saying, which is like anything that you don't deal with now will resurface in the future and often cost you more time, effort, energy, and money. And I think that's a very, like, if you don't recognize maybe some of the stresses that are going on in your body now, your body will eventually get to a point where it will force you to change. And hopefully that's at a point where it's nothing too severe, that you can still make a change and sort of, retract back maybe some of the damage that you've done. But I think the best way to get ahead of that is to have that awareness, as soon as possible and start to be proactive about it, because, 20, 30, 40 years of bad habits are so much harder to undo than, being aware now and be like, oh, maybe I should start prioritizing better sleep. Maybe I should start making healthier choices with my diet and managing my stress a bit more. Maybe not go on my phone right before bed. It's much easier to do today than it will be in 20 years' time.
And if you make small changes, you just consciously make small changes today going forward, it's easier than suddenly having to make a dramatic change when your health, goes wrong. It's never too late, but it's never too early.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
so would you say for a lot of the ladies that come to see you that stress is one of the biggest things you want them to tackle?
Yes, and the other thing about women in today's world is women, and I mean this in the nicest way, we are a victim of our own success, because remember, we've got these hormones changing every single day of every single month, and we can do these amazing things like have babies. It's phenomenal.
Yeah.
But we're also very much in the workplace. Women are looking after elderly relatives, often taking on extra jobs. I am truly inspired by the women I see in my clinics. But then when they tell me that they're struggling, I go, it doesn't surprise me. Yeah. Look at what you're doing, what you expect your body to do. And I am a big believer in self-care. And a lot of people say, oh, self-care, that's just being selfish. That's just going for facials and massages. No, it's actually about thinking about prioritizing your health, like what we've just talked about thinking about, have I been out and seen daylight today, or have I just worked at my desk at home, not even left, the room? Have I, thought about just popping out and getting something that's quite healthy food, or am I just going to eat junk because I haven't got time to look after myself? There's a big thing. No one says they've got time to look after. Everyone's too busy, but we're all on social media for hours.
Oh yes, the average we did a podcast on it recently, didn't we? The average is 3 hours a day on your phone, which is a lot.
But I think it's coming back to what you were saying before. Like the way social media is built is it hacks that part of your brain where it's just so
like dopamine
addictive.
Dopamine
and you just want to watch the next one, and it's like, oh, it's not that good, it's not that good. And then the 20th video, there's a payoff. I mean, it's like, oh, and you keep going again and again and again.
Yeah.
But I mean, anyone who's ever spent, the only times I've probably spent like hours and hours and hours on social media has been probably when I'm hungover. And I notice after like hours of maybe, which I hate it, I just feel like down, depleted, sad, like my dopamine's just flat. I feel just like icky. It's it's not a nice feeling to have at all, but you're fighting against that part of your brain it's just the easier route to go down in a lot of places.
Well, I guess it's like you said, it's coming from that amygdala, I'm guessing.
Absolutely. And, there's lots of research on gentle physical activity, because a lot of people say to me, oh, I'm exhausted, I'm not sleeping. This happens with premenstrual disorders, perimenopause, thyroid problems, burnout syndromes, all sorts of fatigue type illnesses that I look after. And, people say, but I don't want to go to the gym. I don't want to go and I don't want healthy food. I'm craving sugar. Actually, if your cortisol level is through the roof chronically, your brain is saying starvation is coming. It's telling you to eat sugar. So self-compassion, understanding if you're craving that chocolate because you're stressed or because you've got a hangover or whatever, understanding that and saying, look, this is okay, but I need to think about this going forward and maybe try and do things so that I don't feel so exhausted.
I think that's huge. I think for me, explaining that to clients, that it feels something you can't fight because it is your body trying to look after you. When you understand that, it feels a lot easier to be kind to yourself about it, because otherwise I feel like so many women are angry with themselves or ashamed that why can't I be strong? Why can't I avoid the sugar? But you're fighting millions of years of biology here.
Yeah.
So if you can understand that and take the shame away, but like you said, take a step back and say, okay, how do I not fight my biology? How do I change things so that we're both on the same page? That's the way forwards.
And what I say is, if you, on that day when you're feeling you're in a slump, you're exhausted, just small, tiny things like just actually going and seeing daylight. Daylight is incredible, and there's lots of research on it.
Loads,
but yet these natural things, people go, what do you mean going out and seeing the daylight in the morning might be good for my sleep at night or reduce my stress? But it actually, there's quite a lot of research on it. And so if you're feeling like that, just going, even if you can't face going for a walk around the block, I say just go for a walk around the block 5 minutes, or sit in the garden,
with a cup
sit
of tea.
outside, sit on the wall of your. It doesn't, but just get some. And actually, it's kind of an everyday mindfulness thing if you get outside, because you're sort of in the present, and that helps with how you're feeling, your mood, your energy. These are small things, but if you can build them into your everyday life in small amounts, it's easier to make those changes. I mean, we want everyone to have amazing, wonderful, healthy lives all of the time, but everybody starts somewhere.
And it's the seasons. I just to go back a little bit, you mentioned about women carry so much, and you do see that, like nowadays you will see a woman who's working not just 40, maybe had to commute onto that 50 hours a week, is managing a couple of kids, does the majority of the household, runs the household, is maybe looking after one or two sick parents, and it's just, then there's maybe some of the things, like there's a season in work where a project's really busy, and it's like when you could just compound all of that on, there is no time. Like, it feels like there is no time.
It does.
From the second I get up to the second I go to bed, I'm either looking after the kids, in my job, driving here, doing this, and it feels like there is no time. And like you're saying, like when these women speak to you, you're not surprised because of how much they're putting on, but I would go as far with some people, like they feel like that's the expectation, that they should be able to carry all of this. Like, is that something common that you see, and like what do you advise if that's the case?
And what I often say is, you won't be able to sustain this. So if you really want to be everything to everyone around you, you want to be, the best form of yourself at work, your best mother, the best daughter, the best partner, whatever, you won't sustain it, and then you'll get ill, and then you won't be able to do those things. So if you really want to be everything to everyone, you got to start looking after yourself. And it's having that sort of that mindset to think, what can I do? What small things can I do that are going to invest in my future health, and then I will be able to be.
So how do we get there? Because you said before, some people see self-care as selfish, but it's not. It's like quite the opposite, in fact. Because if you do want to be the best for all them people, you do have to invest in that self-care, so you can actually show up. But like a lot of when we're talking about self-care or making that time for yourself, a lot of women, not all women, and I never want to generalize, will put everyone else before themselves. So it can feel difficult about, well, how am I meant to book a 45-minute workout in for myself? Or how am I meant to go for a morning walk or take 5 minutes when everyone else needs me?
So it is different in different phases of life, isn't it? So if you've got, that real sandwich generation, busy phase of life, it can be very difficult. But quite often what women do is they push themselves, doing everything, and then they have days, and this is frequent, their days off. They're just collapsed in a heap when they can actually rest. And it's actually much better to try to just look at your diary. I mean, actually keeping a diary of what you're doing, it sounds like, I don't want to keep a diary. That's more time for me to. But if you do keep a loose diary, you can do it on your phone nowadays anyway, you can actually see that things get bunched up, and then it's too many. And sometimes it's things that you don't need to do. If you actually look at it, you don't need to have those 3 things all on the same day, including a night out with friends in the evening, which you could have moved to the following week, which is empty. It's actually looking at spacing out what you're doing so that actually your busiest days are going to be slightly less busy, but your quietest days, you'll be less absolutely exhausted and wiped out and able to do some of the things that you want to do. And it is different for everyone, but I do think that's 3 hours on social media most days is something that we can all think about and think, actually, if I did half an hour of
Yeah.
exercise or going to the shop to get healthy food or downtime with something that is actually a stress reliever, that makes a big difference. And it doesn't actually take time. I think it's like saying healthy food is too complicated and too time consuming to cook and too much more expensive, and it doesn't always have to be like that at all.
Yeah, I think what's key is you've just been very realistic when you said you just need to move things around, rather than a lot of the advice is, delegate, ask your kids to help with the chores or get a cleaner in.
I've got kids.
It's not actually realistic advice in a lot of cases. So actually, I think a lot of people can resonate with what you said as well, that the week is just 0 to 100 miles an hour, and then the weekend you were zapped, and it feels like a cycle you can't get out of, because to be able to do the next week you have to rest, and to just break that cycle is probably going to feel quite hard.
And something else as well, when you're under stress, you're more likely to get, your immune system is not working, because chronic stress, it impacts on your immune system. Say suppresses your immune system, but it's a complex effect, but it makes you more susceptible to infections. So I see loads of women in the winter, they get into the winter and they're running at 100 miles an hour, and either just before Christmas or just after Christmas, they're absolutely wiped out because they've got a cold, and then it won't settle, and then it goes on the chest, and then they need antibiotics. And this is happening to a lot of people. We're not talking about, this isn't just the odd person. If you're driving yourself into the ground, you're more likely to get chest infections, UTIs, the flu, all these things. That sets you back a lot. If you look after yourself a little bit more and you don't get wiped out for 3 weeks at Christmas, hey, that's really good. And a lot of my patients, in January this year, I wasn't seeing new patients because my waiting list is very long. So I was just I said, right, I'm just going to see all my follow-ups. And it was great because everybody was coming back to see me who'd been seeing me during last year. And usually January, everyone comes in a heap saying, I can't, this is awful. And everyone was coming back. I said, how are you? And they go, yeah, I'm pretty good. Yeah, Christmas was pretty good. Yeah, I'm good. You're good, and it's January. Yeah. Do you remember how you were last May?
Yeah.
So, the thing is, a lot of it is not rocket science. I'm not telling people to go and meditate all day. That's not realistic. I have a busy life. I know, and I speak to patients, and I speak to lots of women day in, day out. I know they can't just quit everything. I do not want women to quit their careers. I do not want that. I did a Women in Leadership event last week. We need more female leaders in society, but women put so much on themselves throughout their adult life. If they get to perimenopause, they're doing too much. They're not looking after themselves, and then the perimenopause hits, and they just think, I can't carry on. Men don't go through menopause, so I've nothing against men.
Is that fully right, though? Because men do have a male menopause. It's just a lot more drawn out in the sense of there's a slower decline of testosterone levels over years.
There's something that's kind of described as the andropause. Some people call it the manopause, So that's sort of more of a part of aging where male hormones can dip down. And there are different, actually, lifestyle factors impact a lot on the changes in male hormone as they get older, but it's absolutely not the same.
Yeah.
So although we can call it andropause, menopause, it's not the same, and it's quite difficult because men's health is important. Men die younger than women. Men get lots of diseases and present later, but a lot of the research we've got is all based on men.
Yeah,
so
which is a problem.
we're actually in some ways a lot better at managing male problems. Men tend to present later with illness. Women tend to go and say there's something wrong, but nobody knows what it is because there's no research in women. So
we were just talking about this earlier, actually, because I've got endometriosis, and the average is 7 years to get a diagnosis. Yeah. And I went to about 5 different doctors. I had scans. I had internal explorations, or whatever the word is. 7 years later, someone finally said, oh, it's this. How is that okay?
No.
But it's because the expertise and the science just isn't there with women's health.
It's really not okay. And I see a lot of women who have a history of endometriosis, and they get referred to me from gynecologists in all sorts of different scenarios. It's quite heartbreaking, actually, to hear the stories.
You're right as well with even some of the bigger names that are on social media now. So you've got like Andrew Huberman, and who's the other guy? Gary Becker. He's the kind of, and it's all like on it's optimization of health, but a lot of it is the data that they're presenting is based on men. And like, yes, there is crossover with a lot of what they say in terms of men and women, but there does need to, you said about female leaders, there definitely needs to be more women that are coming forward in that sort of space and like giving more of a holistic approach towards women's health and issues that are going on, because there does seem to be a lack of that.
Yeah, and the thing is, almost all of the problems that happen in women, if they get the right support, they can feel a lot better and can carry on working. And for most women, for example, in the menopause transition, they're not sick. Some women are, but most women are not sick. Most women will either need a little bit of support and perhaps more support from her doctor. But, you know, it's not complicated what employers have to do to keep women in the workplace. We need it. We need women in leadership roles to balance our world so badly, more now than ever.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it's very important, and talking about it is very important. But the solutions for everybody, there's themes, but the solutions are different for everyone because we're all different. You know, somebody who has endometriosis is different to somebody who has polycystic ovarian syndrome compared with somebody who has premenstrual syndrome or PMDD or perimenopause. You know, these are all different, and the way those conditions impact an individual woman are also impacted by what's going on outside. Like, so for people who've had historic trauma, it's known that their experiences will be different. Neurodiversity can impact. So it's just sort of infinite. We need better individualised care for women.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt, just a quick ask. If you are enjoying today's episode, then please do give us a follow just to make sure you get every episode and we can keep cutting the BS and helping you hit your goals.
Is there a through line of some of the things that we've been mentioning here? So like morning sunlight, exercise, living a healthy lifestyle, having a nutrient dense diet, like a lot of getting great sleep. Like there's a lot of these like bedrocks of foundations of health that no matter any of these conditions that you have, having that foundation as strong as you possibly can be will just, you can still be struggling with some of those issues, but it will make them better.
Yeah. So for some of these conditions I've mentioned, medication may be needed. So I'm not saying that anything that you can do for yourself is going to be absolutely necessary and you'll never need medication, because there's some of my patients doing everything right and they still come to me saying, I'm struggling. But let me just go through what the sort of the 6 pillars are. And these are basically the 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine I'm sure you're aware of. So nutrition, and we don't need to go into the details of that. But what I say is, you know, ideally real food. If you can eat real food and keep lots of real food in your diet, all of the natural foods that you can actually see grew somewhere at some point, rather than in a packet that you don't know.
We were just saying earlier, wasn't we, as basically any foods that haven't been invented in the last 100 years.
Yes.
That's like a good way of kind of thinking about it, because that's mainly where the hyper-processed foods have come from.
Absolutely. Yeah. The ultra-processed are really not doing us any favours. The articles recently that were talking about the ultra-processed foods and the harms, a lot of the doctors were saying that in 10 to 20 years' time, there will be warnings on ultra-processed food like we have warnings on cigarettes.
Wow.
Because they cause cancer, they cause disease.
Yeah.
So nutrition is important. Exercise, I mean, movement, you know, building movement into your daily life is what I would say is important, because there's actually no point in going, you know, doing a boot camp every 6 weeks, 1 hour. It's not going to do it. You need to be doing it. You need to be moving every day. So building movement into your daily life and strength training is really important, but let's just, you know, start where you are and build up. We can't all just start doing strength training. Well, some people can, but it
can be a harder step to take.
It's a direction rather than a destination. So exercise and movement, sleep habits. We've already touched on this, because if you're you know, looking at stressful content, if you're having an argument with someone, if you know you've got blue light shining at you late at night, if you feel stressed, you're not going to sleep, because the sleep hormones are all wrong, and you'll be stressed all night. Like a lady I saw the other day, she said she was awake all night, then she fell asleep in the morning. Her body clock is messed up. Hormones follow body clocks. They all do. You know, cortisol follows a circadian rhythm and an ultradian rhythm, so it goes up when you're stressed. female reproductive cycles are called an ultradian rhythm. You know, your sleep hormones like melatonin follow a circadian rhythm. So that if you help, you know, those aspects, you'll sleep better. And sleep's habitual; it follows habit. So if you're in a terrible insomniac cycle and you do everything right one day, you still won't sleep that day. You've got to continue. Stress management.
Can we just go back to that?
Oh, yeah,
Sleep
go ahead.
feels like such a bedrock.
Absolutely.
And you're just saying about how it affects all the other hormones. So
It
like,
does.
what would you see as some of the key things that people can do to get their sleep in a better place? Maybe like what most people are maybe ignoring.
So, well, shifts. Some people can't do anything about working shift patterns, but if you're having different days and nights, it becomes very difficult. So going to bed at a similar time, I'm not saying it doesn't have to be like 11 o'clock every night or 10 o'clock but a similar time with a similar routine most days. We all have nights when we go to bed later or earlier, but having a similar bedtime, a similar wake-up time. Some people like power naps, but most people who struggle with sleep tend to try and sleep in the day to catch up, and it never works. People who have serious sleep problems and they're trying to sleep for 2, 3, 4 hours in the day, what happens is that 3 to 4 hours, your body thinks you've had a night, 4 hours. So then your cortisol rises, all the hormones for wakefulness rise then in the evening, and then you don't sleep well that night. So if you're doing it's different if you're a good sleeper, you've got no problems and you have a power nap. I think there's some data that suggests tiny power naps earlier in the day are okay. But generally speaking, people I see with big sleep problems don't do well if they're trying to sleep in the day. So keep it as a routine. And there's different advice that you can do if you wake up in the middle of the night stressed. There's little breathing techniques, because you've got to try not to get worked up, because then if you're awake and you think, I've got to get up at 7 and I've got to get back to sleep, you're not going to get back to sleep.
Yeah.
So that's important. Actually, caffeine, it's a simple one. Lots of people say to me who can't sleep, they say, I don't drink any caffeine. But caffeine has a half-life of 6 hours, which means that if you have a cup of coffee at 5 o'clock in the evening, half of that is still in your system 6 hours later. So if you're sensitive to caffeine, not everybody seems to be, but a lot of people are, it will stop you sleeping. So I say, if you're not sleeping at night, cut out the caffeine from like 12 o'clock or cut out caffeine altogether. And people don't understand that things like green tea and some other teas have
even white tea.
Yeah. So, and they say, I don't drink coffee, but I have tea at 9 o'clock at night. And
That's very British as well, isn't it? To
it
have
is.
a cup of tea late at night.
It is. So, and then often in women tend to be heat sensitive, particularly if they get to sort of 45 and over. So if you have spicy food or a big meal late at night, digesting food is a big metabolic activity. So that, again, kind of wakes your body up a bit. So eating late is not great. You might get indigestion, reflux, symptoms. So I tend to say try and eat earlier where you can. It takes at least 2 hours really to digest a meal. And avoid spicy foods because they can make you feel very overheated. Avoid a boiling hot bath or shower just before you go to bed because you can get really hot then.
I thought there was a part of, if you get like a hot bath or a sauna or a hot shower before bed, you get that heat dumping and then it can actually lower the temperature.
There is there's a bit of controversy about that. But generally speaking, if you're very hot when you go to bed, it doesn't help with the night sweats and the waking.
Yeah.
So we tend to say, don't go to bed boiling hot. Wear loose bed clothes, thin cotton is better than...
And having a cool room is really important.
Having a cool room, dimming the lights down, having that calmness before you go to bed. I mean, ideally no devices for as long as possible. I mean, I would say
no
2 hours.
electronics in the bedroom.
No
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
we actually did a whole episode on sleep the other day, and I'd put on the notes, and you're like, no electrons in the bedroom? I was like, no, it's not some new fad, just no phones.
Yeah.
But the number of people who come to me, and I see teenagers as well a lot with sleep problems, and they can get sleep shift disorders where they're up late at night, and then they think that they can then, if they staying up till 5 a.m. and getting up at 12, and then they decide, right, I'm gonna go to bed at 9 tonight, and it just doesn't. You can't shift your sleep cycle back that quickly, and then they get into all complicated problems. But yeah, I mean, it's, I can't remember what I was going to say then.
We were on the 6 pillars, so we went through nutrition,
Yeah.
fitness and movement, sleep, being such a bedrock. And I think...
So sleep is very, very important. Also with sleep, if you're not sleeping, you produce quite a lot of neurohormones during sleep that suppress appetite in the day. So again, if a woman's not slept all night, she's then hungry all day the next day, and then she eats all the wrong food. Because when you're hungry, you don't crave 3 apples, you crave sugar or crisps, those things.
So just on that, because you said a little bit earlier, like people who've got really high cortisol are craving those type of foods as well. And then some people will say, well, I've got sugar addiction. I'm always craving sugary foods. And it's like, have we actually got sugar addiction? Is that even a thing? And then, or is it because you're possibly chronically stressed and underslept?
Well, often it's a bit of a combination. So chronically stressed, not sleeping properly, but ultra processed foods are designed to be addictive. They spend a fortune researching the crunch of crisps. They spend so much money researching the way the chocolate, for example, is going to be melting in your mouth, and the way that the gut hormones respond to those foods tells the brain, this is really good. It's going to prevent me starving. So eat as much as you can. They're designed to be addictive. So there is a degree of addiction with highly ultra processed foods, and it's deliberate from the food manufacturers. So sleep, it's very important. Stress management we've talked about a lot, but there's different ways of doing that, and you have to look at what you're doing in your life, and you have to try and implement strategies that are going to even give you moments of stress relief during the day. So nobody's got time to go and meditate for hours, but there's lots of apps you can get which are just 1 or 2 minutes of just calm breathing or just that meditation type thing. And I always tell, when I give talks, I always say I'm not very good at mindfulness. I open the app and I think, no, I'm not going to do that. We're not all. Some people are really good at it, and I'm not. And I've worked with psychologists in lots of the different multidisciplinary teams that I've worked with in hospital medicine for years. And a trick that one of my psychology colleagues told me was that there's everyday mindfulness is a thing, and I touched on that at the beginning. Just going outside in the fresh air. You've got birds singing, you've got planes flying over you, the wind's blowing, or it's raining on you, and you're brought into the present. And that is a type of mindfulness. Yeah. Just going for a walk and looking around. So those things are really good stress relievers. And then the other things are healthy relationships. And there are a lot of toxic relationships around, I'm afraid, and real life healthy relationships. Again, there's really good research from really good scientific journals showing that having actually healthy relationships, whether I'm not just talking about partners, I'm talking about multi-generational friendships, relationships. And we know, I don't know if your audience is familiar with the blue zones, but the blue zones are areas of the world where people live very, very long lives. They're not medicated to live long lives. They're just they have healthy longevity, and they often live to over 100 and with very low rates of chronic disease. And there's themes which all follow the lifestyle medicine that I'm talking about. But one of the things is they have intergenerational relationships. The grandchildren are mixing with the grandparents, and everybody's having dinner together. Not every single meal, but they're mixing.
It's so
and community
into today's society.
It is.
It really is.
It is.
Yeah.
But it's profound, and it's a stress reliever. So it links back to that. And people who have good, healthy relationships have lower blood pressure. They have lower rates of obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and cancer. This is known. Yeah. You look at it. So, it's things that we can do. If we know about that, and I'm all about empowering people. I'm not trying to say, well, you're not doing that, so you're not going to live long.
Yeah.
I'm trying to say, maybe every now and again, get the family together, or get friends. If you don't know your family, get your friends together. Friendships are very important, and we might not all have close family connections, but most of us have got some friendships.
You can really see why there's a real epidemic, though, because if we were to look at nutrition, you've got highly palatable foods and restaurants and advertising and food made by design to trick your brain and to just keep making you want to eat more and more and more. Then you've got, a society nowadays that's Amazon Prime and everything's delivered to your door and working from home. So everything's designed to make you move less and stay at home and just seek
And
comfort.
also see no humans.
And see no humans.
Yeah, and then you've also got, on top of that, you've got your sleep where, again, you're addicted to your phones, Netflix, TV series, things that are really engaging hooks. So your brain's wired for that, so it's affecting your sleep. Then you're going into your stress management. Well, no one's really taught how to manage the stress. All of those things we just mentioned, better diet, movement, and good sleep would have all helped with stress, but that's not happening. And then we're not taught how to manage stress. And then on top of that, people are more lonely than ever before. The amount of people that say they've got one close friend that they can turn to, and especially I think men, it's even worse, but it's still an issue with women too, like loneliness, people not spending time with family communities is at an all-time low. So it's like all the 5 bedrocks we've just mentioned are, and I think this is what saddens me so much and why we try to make such a loud noise, and like yourself, is that it does seem like it's going off a cliff edge, and you know, and it is.
But it's never too late to change. And I think actually there's more awareness in younger people now because we're talking about it. You know, lots of people are talking about this. Because if you realise that your loneliness is probably contributing to a lot of how you feel, you know, and losing motivation to do other things, you know, just going for a walk with a friend or, you know, chatting to someone. Apparently in one of the Scandinavian countries, they've got a supermarket where older people can go and have a chat with the cashiers and a coffee or something like that.
It used to be like quite a normal thing, isn't it? When you went to Sainsbury's, there'd be maybe like 50-year-old woman who would know the people that come in on a Monday and like, oh, Betty comes in and gets her shopping and we have a 5-minute chat. And now it's a self-service check-in.
And now it's self-service. So, but there are, if you know that it's going to be helpful, then you think about that. And again, this whole, the frontal lobe comes in, rather than the emotional centre saying, I'm just going to stay at home and I don't want to see anyone and I don't want to go for a walk. You can think, your logical brain, your critical think, you can use your we need critical thinking. Using our frontal lobe more now to thrive than ever before. And none of it's impossible.
Yeah.
So although it's sad to think about maybe where we've got to, and I'm sure the pandemic hasn't helped, you know, a whole generation of people, there's so much that can be done. And then the other one that's really important that we haven't touched on are harmful substances, because, you know, all of those things you talked about, no one ever talks about hard drugs, soft drugs, alcohol, smoking, which are still big problems across society, not going away. So
would that include vaping as well?
Well, I mean, vaping is difficult. It's better than smoking for people who are quitting smoking, but it's worse than not vaping.
Yeah.
And there are harmful lung effects to vaping. So we don't want young people to start vaping, but they are because of the marketing and advertising. It's the new thing.
And the ease of
There's
access,
there was something in the news recently where they are going to ban the disposable vapes though, because they are aimed at teens.
Yes.
So
and I think they were
really
going to
happy
raise
see
the
that.
age as well, the legal age. So
yeah. So just to summarise then, the 6 main pillars are nutrition, exercise and movement, sleep, stress management, good relationships, and managing harmful substances. Yeah. Which is pretty much what we talk about all the time.
Absolutely, and it's important.
Yeah,
we shouldn't have to apologise for talking about those.
But
and
it's all like quite boring.
Well, I think
to some people.
The problem with today's world is everybody wants a miracle cure, and social media promises miracle cures. So therefore, why should anyone listen to us saying, you know, because as you said, it's doing something that's a bit harder now, which is an investment in the future. Whereas if they think they can have a quick fix, why?
But you know, the more I've like battled with that and ruffled with that, because it's become more of a consistent message of some people now about doing hard things, is that if I were to just get up in the morning and just went on social, like I think about sometimes like inverted thinking. Like if I wanted to feel my absolute worst, what would I do? I would get up in the morning, I'd probably eat loads of processed food straight away. I'd probably scroll on social media. You know, I probably wouldn't move my body all day. I wouldn't go outside. And I'd get to the end of the day, and it doesn't matter if I watch an episode of Netflix or done something enjoyable. It wouldn't be enjoyable of an evening because I've just absolutely depleted my dopamine and not done anything challenging. Versus typically, I'll get up and I'll have a jump in a cold shower straight away. I'll go and exercise straight away. I won't go on my phone for the first couple of hours. I'll tick off a couple of big tasks. And it's like by, 12, 1 o'clock, I feel great with the task that I've ticked off, that I've done some difficult things. I've moved my body. I've had some sunlight. And then when it comes to the evening and watching an episode of Netflix or spending time with my partner, it's so much more enjoyable. So actually those quote unquote hard things make my life so much more.
Maybe they need a rebrand.
Yeah.
Because are they hard
They're not,
for you?
but they don't have to be. I think, again, because we always want to see results quickly, we often people will try and do too much. So they do too much and then crash. So it's a bit like the busy women that we're talking about, and they go, right, okay, in January I'm going to start doing exercise, and they're doing everything that they're normally doing. They're probably recovering from the terrible flu they had at Christmas, and then they're trying to go to the gym, and it's just all too much, and so it lasts a few weeks and then they stop. Whereas if you just, and that's why I talk about small changes, micro dose these changes, and it makes a difference. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I love that example you gave of just go outside, because it's something I said to Reese the other day. I've been getting like hormonal acne, and he's like, go and see a dermatologist, go and do this. I'm like, I really just need to go for a walk every day. I know what I need to do. But it is so easy to fall into that pattern of get up, get my son to nursery, start work. Before he gets back, make sure the dinner's ready, make sure the dog's like okay, but he's old, so he doesn't really need a walk anymore. And before you know it, it's been 3 days and I haven't really left the house. And I can totally see why that just becomes a slippery slope if you're not aware of how that impacts things. And then you think, oh, I got advertised this prescription skincare on Facebook. I'll just buy that. That'll sort it.
Yes.
And I did. And then guess what? It didn't work. So I'm like, no, just need to properly look after my stress a bit more.
And as we said, these lifestyle approaches are good for our infrastructure of health and our infrastructure of well-being. It doesn't mean that if you've got hormone problems that you might not need extra support. And I see women who've got great lifestyles and they come to me and they say, over the last couple of years, I started to feel anxious and I've got these terrible hot sweats at night, can't sleep, and I'm doing everything in terms of my lifestyle, and I'm drenching at night because of the menopause. And so then that, I'm not saying that we wouldn't support women with hormone treatments. It's similarly, polycystic ovarian syndrome can cause problems. All the other hormone problems that can occur across the adult lifespan may need support. But the key, and this is what I always say to my patients, is if you're not doing any of those lifestyle, approaches to help your infrastructure of health, the medication won't work as well. It never does. Yeah. It works much better for everything if you're already doing all those things.
Yeah. Do you find, so like, that I've seen that it's almost like your foundation is your soil, and if your soil's really healthy when you add the medication to it, like HRT, you're going to see so many more benefits from it. Yeah. But and correct me if I'm wrong here, for some people, and because it can be so person dependent, sometimes even just doing some of those foundational habits can feel so difficult, maybe going through perimenopause and menopause, that actually the medication can actually help them start the actions and healthy habits to begin with.
Yeah, so I see some women who are doing everything right and struggling, and I see some women who say to me, I'm doing everything to everyone, I'm working, I've got kids, young kids, I've elderly parents, I'm just too exhausted to do anything because I can't sleep because of... So yes, in that situation, it's definitely helpful to add in some treatment support, HRT or whatever it is that's suitable for that woman at that time. But if I tell women, right, let's use this medication, and it's the same with premenstrual disorders, PMS and PMDD, I say, right, you need medication because this is too much. This is absolutely destroying your quality of life.
What would be too much? Like, what are you seeing symptom-wise, or is it like
high
blood pressure, or is it?
Well, no, it's just, it can be all different things. With premenstrual disorders and perimenopause, at certain times in the month, women can feel absolutely depleted. It can mess with your mental health, brain fog. Is that
spoken about much? Like the fact that it can, like, suicide is probably the highest in women going through menopause and perimenopause.
Well, suicide's much higher in men than women.
It's right, yeah.
But there's a peak in suicide in men and women in midlife, and we don't understand how much that link is to do with female hormone changes, stress, external stuff going on. So it's complicated, and I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist, so I don't like to talk too much about that, but it's absolutely clear that women do get mental health symptoms in some women, not all women, but some women get mental health symptoms, both in terms of around the menstrual cycle with the premenstrual disorders and in the perimenopause. actually post-menopause, those symptoms settle down. So even in women who aren't on hormone therapy, that it's not like it just gets worse and worse and worse unless you're medicated. Lifestyle helps, but hormone therapy can, in women going through perimenopause and different hormone treatments or other treatments in younger women, can be a game changer. Yeah. But I always say, and let's also make sure that you're doing everything with your lifestyle, because that will give you that extra anyway.
It kind of makes sense though, from, you know, that your mental health would suffer if you haven't got this bedrock of health. You're taking on all of this, and then you go through perimenopause and menopause, and it's this massive slap in the face. And now all of a sudden you've got all this pressure, but you just can't perform.
The reserves.
Yeah, you just can't perform. You don't know sort of where to turn or why this is happening to your body. Like, I've not changed anything. Why am I just crashing so much?
And that's why raising awareness is so good, because if women in their 30s and 40s realise that actually they might be running on a bit of an overdraft of you know, bad lifestyle habits, and that may well hit very hard in midlife when they go into perimenopause. So it's an opportunity for younger women to think, right, no, I'm not going to let that happen to me. I'm going to get in as good shape as I can. And there's never a guarantee. As I said, you can be in great shape and still get problems with menopause symptoms, but then you can have treatment, and that should definitely help. I do see a lot of women as well, which we haven't covered, who I see they've already gone on HRT through someone else, and they come to me and they go, I've tried 6 different types and it's not helping. And the other practitioners haven't said, actually, what are you doing about your stress? What's going on in your life? And then when we address that missing link, then they feel much better.
Can we get into that then? Because you've mentioned like 6 different types, and you know, I know you know, when it comes to having hormone replacement therapy, I know a lot of women who have just been given one pill and they've been on that for 10 years. And I know with guys, when they take testosterone replacement therapy, they will it's a lot less complicated, but they will typically just find the right levels of testosterone, kind of get them there, whatever the dose is, a couple of blood tests, and then they maybe do a blood test every 6 months and they kind of stay there. But like with women, you're looking at progesterone, estrogen and testosterone to try and level that out, and testosterone isn't often prescribed too much in HRT. No,
so the HRT that is recommended for menopause symptoms is usually either estrogen alone if a woman's had her womb removed. So you can only have estrogen. Estrogen's the hormone that is really going to be helping with the menopause transition symptoms. But if you've got a womb and you give estrogen alone, the womb thickens and you can get womb cancer. So we have to give estrogen and progesterone. And if we don't get that balance right, women can get problems with heavy bleeding. If they're on too much estrogen, they can get sore breasts, headaches, fluid retention, weight gain. If they're on not enough, you know, obviously the symptoms won't settle. And if they're not on enough progesterone, then they can get gynecological problems worsening, because progesterone is important to protect the womb from fibroids, from womb thickening, endometriosis. And heavy bleeding is common in the perimenopause. So I've already explained there's a few different. So testosterone is indicated in women for reduced libido in menopause. It's not actually recommended for a joie de vivre or, you know, well-being, because actually there's a lady in Australia called Susan Davis who's done all the research and who brought the female testosterone that's licensed to market. And if you look at the studies, the well-being benefits of testosterone in the placebo-controlled trial is cancelled out by placebo. So placebo has quite a significant effect on well-being type symptoms. So it's not any different. We could just give somebody a placebo and they'd get the same benefit.
But also, let's go back to those 6 pillars, because if you get all of that in check, you're probably going to feel much more up for it anyway.
You are.
If it's libido that we're trying to resolve here.
Yeah, and the postmenopausal, absolutely. And if you're exhausted, you're not, you know, your libido drops down, whether you're a man or a woman. And the postmenopausal ovaries do produce some testosterone. So women who've had their ovaries removed are more often in need of extra testosterone. But your adrenal glands produce testosterone throughout life in men and women. And that's quite an important source to help with your libido. And if you're stressed, your cortisol suppresses that testosterone production. So there are lots of sort of psychosexual factors. If you're exhausted, if you're stressed, you won't be producing the hormone. It's almost like an evolutionary thing saying don't procreate.
To have a baby.
Don't have a baby if you're stressed. Yeah. Yes. So it's kind of that sort of thing, really. So
that's actually hilarious because I think that's why I got pregnant. But so I couldn't have I don't. We didn't get pregnant for 5 years, and then life calmed down a bit. We got our own home instead of constantly moving around, and within like 2 months I was pregnant.
So I see that a lot in my younger women who have had fertility problems related to hormones. So I won't go into them, but there's polycystic ovarian syndrome, something called a prolactinoma. There's various hormone problems in younger women that can cause subfertility as well as gynecological problems, and they've gone through, really, really desperate for a pregnancy and gone through various supported treatments to try and help with fertility over a number of months, and really stressed, desperate. Both couple come. They go, what can we do? Can we do anything else to try and help? And then I'll go, okay, so you've had this course of treatment, so we're going to just put it on hold for the moment, and what we'll do is we'll just leave you, see what your cycles do. And we'll do some blood tests looking at the hormones in a few, and then they always come back pregnant because it does, just like your story of what you just said. The stress goes away. They're not worrying about it, and
it's
it
mad,
happens.
Isn't it?
It's.
But it makes so much sense.
Yeah, I mean, like
it's an observation that I've seen many times.
When you say it, it doesn't almost seem mad. It's like your body is just doing what it's supposed to do. I mean, you also see with women who get really low body fat percentage, they typically lose their period.
Yeah.
And again, it's just your body. It's like, hey, like if you're
being super smart.
Yeah, it's being really smart.
Exactly right. Yeah. And I deal with that a lot. But the only problem when your periods stop like that is it's not as effective as a contraceptive. So I see sometimes I've seen women who've never had a period and they've had 3 children.
No,
because the periods never come back. Yeah, and they just so. It's not a good contraceptive.
So just going back to the HRT side.
Oh,
of
yeah,
things
yeah.
as well, because, obviously you're saying you've been on 6 different treatments. So how does that happen?
Yeah.
And also never being advised to do anything.
Yeah. So the menopause transition from peri to post-menopause is a moving target. So in perimenopause, periods can be heavier or lighter, more frequent or less frequent, more painful or less painful. They can come and go. The symptoms can come and go. So how we use HRT regimens in perimenopause is different to post-menopause. And we need to use regimens. If a woman's having heavy periods, there's certain regimens that are better than others, because otherwise, when you're giving more estrogen, your periods can get even heavier. Some women don't mind having heavier periods, some women do. So again, it's individual preference. But we're generally using combinations of estrogen and progesterone. Generally, progesterone formulations either come as tablets. You can get them in skin patches that stick on the skin. You can also get hormone devices that are put into the neck of the womb, the marina and other systems which are contraceptive, but they can also be used as part of HRT. So there's different ways of giving it. Estrogen comes in tablet form. The tablet form is fine for healthy younger women, but if you've got complex health issues, or if you're older, it can increase the risk of blood clots and strokes. But I mean, strokes
it's very similar to when we're looking at contraceptive options, by the sound of it.
It is a bit, yeah. And then estrogen can be given through the skin. It used to be used as implants, but you get something called tachyphylaxis. You can get very, very high levels, and then you get withdrawal effects as the levels go back to normal. So there's loads of different ways to do it. So when people talk about, just go on HRT and everything will be fine, it's not one thing. It's a moving target, because I've got patients, they can say, please tell me I'm postmenopausal, because we're changing the regimen, and they're still perimenopausal at like 56, 57. And when is this going to stop?
That's a good question, actually, because someone asked me the other day, well, how do you know when you're perimenopausal? And there isn't really a test for it, if I'm right.
Well, there isn't a test for perimenopause, but I think at the moment with the social media sort of awareness, almost women are like getting a hot sweat and thinking, oh, this is a crisis. I must be going into perimenopause. And we don't want to make people frightened of it. The awareness should be to empower women. So in perimenopause, the symptoms that are most closely linked with the hormone changes are changes in the periods. So if you've had regular periods and suddenly they're either much more frequent, much less, what I've just said, heavier, lighter. but a change in the periods, or if they stop, obviously, then for a few months, that's a sign. The vasomotor symptoms, we call them, which is the hot sweats, flushes, night sweats, that heat sensitivity, which for some women is minimal. They just say, oh, I just feel a bit hot. Fine, great. Some women, drenching night sweats, pouring with sweats in meetings, having to change their clothes. It's a very individual experience, but that is one of the symptoms that most women know about being associated with menopause. And then vaginal symptoms. So they're the three that are very tightly linked with the changes in hormones. But then there are other symptoms. So if you're not feeling right because of these, you don't sleep as well. You feel more tired in the day. You might be more hungry, craving the sugar, so you're eating more, and then you're gaining weight, and then you suddenly think your body's changing because you suddenly got a tie around your middle. Lots of women say that to me. What's going on? I've never put weight here. Brain fog.
And why is that? Could you explain?
Oh, the change in fat distribution.
Well, there is a small change in fat distribution as the estrogen drops down across the perimenopause. We're talking about a couple of pounds, really, a small amount. But a lot of women today are gaining a lot more than that because of we have this is probably a triggering word, but it's what we use scientifically. We have an obesogenic environment. So when it would have been £2 you'd gained in the 1980s, now it's like 2 stone because it's so easy. Because if you're exhausted and also remember that everybody's overcommitted. So
what was that word? Because that was
obesogenic environment.
And that's
it's
very obvious, isn't it?
Well, we're in an obesity epidemic.
Yeah.
So at the moment, 75% of the UK population are either overweight or obese.
The UK as well. Oh, wow. Because we often
That's
talk
UK
about
data.
That for US stats.
That's NHS data.
Wow, I didn't know that was here too.
And the prediction by the World Obesity Forum is that by 2035, 75% of the UK population will be obese, i.e. body mass index over 30.
How much?
75% will be obese.
So, okay.
And it's not changing at the moment, you see. People go, oh, well, if we know about it, well, nobody will be obese by 2035, will they?
Well, I don't think anybody knows. Like, it's our job and we didn't know. So.
Yeah, so I work very much in obesity and metabolism, obviously. So...
just coming back to menopause then, because and you've mentioned metabolism and obesity, and these are common things that people will say is that my metabolism is slowed down because I'm going through menopause, and from some of the studies and data that we've read, that isn't the case, but in the sense of like your body doesn't change, but your hormones changing, and having night sweats and poor sleep is going to impact your behavior and appetite, which because it affects your behavior, you then burn fewer calories and eat more calories, which is what causes you to gain body weight. But it's not necessarily like the laws of thermodynamics or calories in, calories out has necessarily changed.
So association doesn't mean causation. Midlife women who are under massive stress and going through menopause are gaining weight at the moment. But if you look at midlife women 30 years ago, they weren't gaining that same amount of weight. So we haven't had a change in our, genetic physiology in the last 30 years. This is environmental.
That brings me on to I don't know how I'm guessing you are quite versed in this, but like the whole massive increase in weight loss injections and the advertising for this lately is just...
It's everywhere.
It is everywhere.
It's very, very concerning because we know that we've got an epidemic level of eating disorders in society as well because of social media. Everyone looks perfect. It's all fake. But younger people are, you're well aware of it, a sort of body image issues. And the drugs that are used, the skinny jabs, you might call them, they are drugs which have been licensed for diabetes for some time, and we're now using them to help people who have severe obesity, because the problem is once you get a body mass index of over 35, that probably doesn't mean a lot to a lot of people, but once you get to a level of, you're a lot heavier than is healthy for your body, you do have problems with insulin balance in your body. You have insulin resistance and problems with insulin sensitivity. And insulin blocks fat burn. So it becomes really complex as you gain weight. It becomes more difficult to lose weight. So working in an obesity service, it breaks my heart to see people saying all the stigma, all the obesity stigma, because it's actually, if you're just a bit overweight and you need to lose a couple of pounds, that's different. But But we're talking about somebody who's gained weight over 20 years. They might have lots of reasons why it's been really difficult to manage weight. They might have trauma history. They might have had physical injuries, all sorts of things. And so these injections, and we have multi-molecules now. In my whole career, we haven't had drugs that can help manage obesity. They've all been problematic. And these drugs are great for diabetes, and they're very effective to help people with severe obesity to lose weight sustainably, to the level of what we can do with the bariatric surgery that we've had for a long time. This is for people who have significant health issues from severe obesity. It's being now abused so much in people who just want to, lose body fat for social media purposes. Is that we've got shortages. We can't give these drugs to the people who need it. People with diabetes who need these drugs can't get hold of them because there's a shortage, because it's being sold to people who don't need it and potentially might come to harm from it, to be honest.
It's one of the European companies who sells purely to America. Has just become one of the biggest companies to ever come out of Europe, being valued at $500 billion, selling Ozempic and to the States. And it's insane. I just showed you another site the other day, didn't I? It's a UK medication one that's come out, and there seems to be more and more just popping up
everywhere.
And the reason is it's you just said there, 75% of the population overweight and obese. Same in the US, but it's so the total addressable market, the TAM that's available as a market, and that's also why I think there's been such an explosion in menopause marketing. Is it's not like every single woman is going to go through menopause or perimenopause or menopause. So there's a huge market and starving crowd to present this miracle. And as we're saying, like, nobody necessarily wants to do the work or some of the stuff that we're talking about, lifestyle changes, but hey, I'll just take a drug. The difficulty is, people who are morbidly obese and 20 years of trauma, bad habits, history, parents raised, education. There's such a slew of things that it could be. And you want to have the empathy and compassion for those people. But then when there's people who are taking it who are 15 pounds overweight, and it's like, I'll just take my skinny jab, or I'll just take my injection instead of doing a diet. It's concerning.
It absolutely is. And what I'm saying, and you talk about the menopause market, but also the market with these skinny jabs, is that these treatments, ironically, are widening health inequalities, because the people who need treatment aren't getting it. And the people who have money and access can do whatever they want. So, and that's a big, big issue, because when we're talking about health, we want health across the nation. We don't just want health per postcode. If you've got the good postcode, you're going to live a long time. That's where we are.
Yeah.
If you live in certain postcodes, you're going to live a really long time.
Like
if you live
years longer.
Yeah. And, you have lower rates of cancer, lower rates of diabetes, and other postcodes you don't. So that's something that needs to be addressed.
Part of the reason I was so surprised when you gave those obesity stats for the UK was even the life expectancy between us and the US is 4 years difference at the moment for a woman. And I put a lot of that down to the diet and the rates of obesity, but it seems like we're maybe catching up a little bit in some ways, which is quite scary.
I think we're behind the US, and most of the rest of Europe is better than us. But we're not that far behind.
Yeah. So with the GLP-1, so those weight loss medications, would you be able to just briefly explain how they work? Because there's a lot of interest from our audience because it's touted as this kind of magic solution.
Well, it's not a magic solution. It's messing with your physiology to in a few different ways to suppress. It very much suppresses your appetite to the point where it can cause severe nausea, severe vomiting. So it's not like you just take it and just lose weight. You can't eat with it, And if you do eat, you'll be sick, and they cause quite severe, for most people, quite severe constipation as a side effect. And the risks overall, apart from the side effects, not too bad. There can be some sort of risks if you've got sort of gallbladder disease, if you've got a history of a very rare type of thyroid cancer. We recommend it's not given. But they work in complex ways to improve insulin action effectively and reduce appetite. So, they work better, actually, I think, in people who are very overweight. I've heard from people who are not very overweight who use it, and often they have terrible side effects. But clearly it's a bit like any of the weight loss cures online that you see these before and after, and these people are sort of showcasing the amazing results, and it's for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
And what about the long-term plan for these people?
Yeah, so that's a very good question, because when we use these medications in weight management services, proper structured weight management services, where they are licensed for use in the UK, but except we can't get hold of them because there's shortage, they have to be as part of a longer term plan. So you're helping somebody lose weight, but you're also helping them to understand how they keep that weight off. And it's a bit like what I was saying to you about, HRT or medications for female hormones. Unless you've got strategies to maintain your health longer term, then any help from a medication, you shouldn't be taking these drugs for weight loss long term. You should be taking them short term and then to get to a means to an end and then keep the weight off.
Because a lot of the studies do show if you stop, then the weight will come back very quickly.
Well,
that's 2/3 of the weight comes back.
And that's because they're not being given the appropriate management advice. And even after bariatric surgery or gastric banding, there's loads of different procedures. If people are not given the right support, weight can regain.
We've had clients join us actually after surgery, haven't we? And they've gone through all of that, and then a couple of years later back to where they started. And then after a couple of months with us, they've gone, I wish I did this the first time, because I can now see this is how I will just live my life and it will stay like this.
Well, it's a little bit going back to the instincts, the amygdala in the brain that I told you about. If you've had a lifetime of having certain eating patterns or certain activity or lack of activity patterns or too much stress, all these things, then of course that weight will regain again.
So when it comes down to it, you would say they are okay if you use them alongside lifestyle measures as well, similar to the HRT.
For people who are indicated to have them, which is people with
it's over 30,
obesity.
isn't it? Really,
That's classed as being morbidly obese, isn't it?
30 is obese.
And 35, over 35.
And 35 is severe or morbid obesity.
Yeah. It's in terms of, have you seen any of the issues when there's like a lack of serotonin production from people taking the weight loss injections, in the sense of it's affecting the gut that much that it's actually affecting the production of serotonin in the gut and then having a negative effect on people's mental health?
Well, I've heard about that, but I haven't. I mean, I don't, to be perfectly honest, because I'm quite busy with my women's health work.
Yeah.
I have a colleague, and if I think somebody's going to be suitable for Ozempic or any of those other medications, I refer them to my colleague. So I don't tend to prescribe it, just so all your audience knows.
Yeah.
They're not to come to me for that.
Which actually leads me on to a slightly different change in the conversation, but I think it's really interesting is you're such a busy woman. You have all these things going on. You have your own family. How do you actually manage all this stuff? Because as we've said, it's not super easy to fit into a hectic schedule.
Well, it's not, but I think that's why I want to share my knowledge, really, because I really understand all of this. I kind of understand the importance of movement and exercise and good sleep patterns. It's for men and women, but for women, as I said, because hormones are a moving target in adult life, there's just no substitute. And I know when I look on social media that the quick fixes are fake, and I know that, there's a lot of commercial industry trying to make money, particularly from women, from weight loss, from everything else. So I think I'm very empowered because I just ignore it. Whereas if you're a woman and you're in a situation and you're struggling, and you're not using maybe that critical thinking because you're too busy using critical thinking in every other aspect of your life. So it's not that hard. It's not that hard. I'm doing it's my day job.
Yeah.
So, and of course, you wouldn't. I've heard patients say, "Well, I went to my doctor and they said to me I should do this, that, and the other, and they look really unhealthy and I'm not going to listen to them." So, of course, I practice what I preach. I don't say go and do strength training. I say I do strength training 5 times a week, and I walk every day because walking is my everyday mindfulness. When I've done a long clinic, yes, I feel a bit saturated, and I go outside. If it's pouring with rain, if it's sunny, great, But I'll go out and do my walk because that's my downtime. Very different amounts of exercise. I try and eat healthy. I try and have a sleep routine. I try not to drink too much. nobody is perfect. And I think social
Yeah.
media says you must never do this and you must never do that and you must always do this. And look at me, I'm perfect.
It's such bollocks, isn't it? Like, there's not a perfect person listening to this podcast.
There is no such thing as perfection.
Yeah.
And that's why it goes back to what I said about self-compassion, because women in particular beat themselves up. They go, I've had chocolate or crisps, or I've not been for a walk today. That's okay. We need self-compassion. We'll always do something that isn't, you're always going to have a late night now and again, or, that's fine. But it's just about trying to do things. It's no good going to the gym once a year. It just doesn't work in January. Yeah. It's about building in these micro habits into your everyday life. And actually then after about 8 weeks, when you introduce something new, it becomes habit. Mm-hmm. And so then it's easier to do. Yeah. So it's not hard. I mean, we say, we're telling people to do all these hard things.
It's easy for us to say, though, isn't it? Because we have done the work of implementing those habits, and over time they've become part of our routines. But I think when you are looking at what changes you would like to make as a whole, a lot of our clients feel overwhelmed by where to even start, don't they? Because I need to start walking, and I need to start exercising, and I need to start changing my diet, and I need to look at my sleep, and I need to start making some more friends. So, it is quite overwhelming. So if there was a hierarchy of things, what would you pick, like the top 3 that someone should focus on?
Well, for healthy longevity, I think moving. And I understand if you're exhausted or you haven't got time, it's difficult. And I understand that, you need to do one thing at a time. So just moving, walking, getting outside, would be my number one. Start there. And then the rest will follow, because you'll feel better. After a while, you'll feel better. And then you'll think, what can I do next?
That really is the key, isn't it? It's just to start like so little that it feels almost like ridiculous that you wouldn't be able to do it. I mean, it's just building upon that over time, so it feels, so you can just keep building on it. And then over time, as we're saying, like, it doesn't, I guess I'm saying, like, do these hard things, whether a workout or whatever else. But yeah, you're right. Like, it doesn't actually feel hard for me right now. Once you establish this foundation of healthy habits and you do it for years, it just becomes part of your identity and who you are and how you identify yourself.
Yeah, I saw one of your posts and you said, getting fit is really hard. Staying fit is not that hard. And that fits with all of the things that we want to do. So I would say movement is my number one. It's really hard giving a top 3, really. I think that trying to increase whole food and reduce the bad stuff, not exclude it, because again, you won't achieve that if you love chocolate and you're going to say, I'm never going to eat any more chocolate ever again in my life. You'll just get depressed.
Also, we need to have some joy.
We do. So if you increase the amount of whole food you eat, you'll be fuller. The fibre is good for your gut health. We haven't even talked about microbiome, and well-being. But whole food has really huge benefits, and as many different types of whole food as possible. And if you're eating more of that, I can tell you after a while, you'll crave the sugar less.
Yeah.
Well, the ultra-processed
It won't
foods.
even taste good when you have it.
It doesn't, no, after a while. So again, slowly, but just increase. When you go to the supermarket next, get something that you think, I quite like that. And that's a whole food, whether it's nuts or whether it's lentils
That's
or
a bit of a
spinach.
lie as well. I think some people believe is that, like, healthy food doesn't taste good. Like, healthy food can be unbelievably tasty if you make the time to start, like, incorporating more into your diet and make tasty meals.
Yeah. I also think sometimes people think they have to transform their whole diet, whereas we were talking earlier about oats, and if you currently have like a Oat So Simple instant oat pot, even just swapping that to like Ready Brek to then swap that to oats, it's like a ladder. You don't have to transform your whole life overnight, and you don't have to start eating eggs and broccoli for breakfast.
But I told one of my patients with diabetes that exactly the other day about because the little ready-made oat packets have huge amounts of sugar, like enormous. And you could actually, if you just made your own oats, you can actually put a tiny bit of sugar in
honey,
or honey, or a bit of fruit, I don't know, whatever you like to eat, and it will taste nicer because they're horribly sweet, those packet things.
They're also more expensive.
Yeah, they
and
are.
there is this
much more.
This, I don't know if it's a narrative that's based in some fact, but people are saying it's too expensive to eat healthy. But then I think if you look at those kind of options, what's in your shopping basket, often the processed option is a lot more expensive. But you maybe are saving time.
The convenience of
And
it.
even time. I mean, an omelette doesn't take 5 minutes. And you can put some onions or spinach or tomatoes in it.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'll say, so people will say they're fussy eater. With the vegetable, I say something that's simple. And again, it's different for everyone. But oats are brilliant. You know, that changing that for breakfast. Eggs are really good.
Yeah.
I wish you were here earlier, Annice. We had 8 boxes of eggs here to make the point.
Brilliant. Yeah. Absolutely brilliant. They are amazing. And they're just so quick.
Yeah.
Whatever you want to do with them. And then, I mean, it does vary. But what I say with a lot of my patients who, again, with the sugar crashes, you know, and they get really low, and they'll eat, I'll eat anything, but I just get sugar crash, and then I drink a bottle of Lucozade. I'm like, oh no. Yeah. And so I say, get a load. Do you like vegetables? Do you like, you know, things like celery is not expensive, carrots. Certain times of the year, if you eat seasonally, you can get food very reasonably, whole food. Chop them all up, put them in the fridge, and you know, whether you like cottage cheese or whether you like Philadelphia cheese or whether you like a bit of hummus, but that gives it a bit of flavour, and eat your vegetable sticks. And for women who don't have time, who are working from home, that's a great healthy snacks rather than if you're starving and you've not eaten, reaching for the crisps or something else. It's different for everyone. What I also say about food, don't try and eat what you don't like. Yeah. Because you're not going to sustain that. It's like with the exercise. If you hate swimming, then it's probably not. You might manage it, but
yeah, they're always like, I see them just like as hacks. Like you'll get someone who will go to the gym and jump on the Stairmaster for 60 minutes and scream discipline, and it's so hard. And then you'll get the other person who will go and play tennis for an hour and love it. And it's like they both probably burnt the same amount of calories. Maybe the person doing tennis got social elements with the partner or the person they were playing with, a bit of competitiveness, burnt lots of calories, exercise for an hour. Was like, yeah, see you next week. The person who done the Stairmaster was like, I hate this. I don't want to ever do it again. You know, it's the same with foods. Like if you just start incorporating more healthy foods into your diet that you enjoy, like maybe, let's say you just swapped out one food every 2 weeks. Yeah. In a year, your diet is completely different. You are probably having a very healthy diet now. So yeah, I think it's just making it so simple and easy. And yeah, even though I've said you need to do some of the hard things, there is a place for that too. You do have to show up regardless of circumstance sometimes.
Yeah, I agree. I think so. But I think it's how you're feeling. And if you're having a bad day and it's just not happening today, again, be kind to yourself. But the small changes, great. And then if you have a good day and you think, right, I'm just going to go for something hard today, then brilliant.
Go for it,
yeah, definitely.
So that's 2. Which is going to be my 3rd? I don't know. I think healthy relationships. I love my girlfriends. I love my family connections. I mean, anybody who's got kids, you're only as happy as your most unhappy child, you know. Or
I've never heard that before. It's hilarious.
Well, it's true. And so I think that is really important, and it's probably one of the things that's not talked about. That you know, relationships, not just partner, but the extended relationships.
Yeah. And even that's like a huge thing to do in university as well, because it's not just like, it can be with animals as well, and having dogs. Yeah. You know, like in a lot of universities, people they have like rooms of puppies, don't they, where people can
pets
go.
Pets are incredible.
Yeah, pets are incredible for helping with that. But yeah,
I told you should get a dog.
And they also give you structure, so they get the routine.
Blood pressure. There's studies showing if you pet a dog, your blood pressure comes down.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I mean, there's a lot of. It's weird though, isn't it? Because I would never want anyone to get an animal because they feel like that's going to make them healthier.
Yeah, it's selfish. Yeah. Okay, I take it back.
No, just in case anything, you know, I guess it happened to the dog and that side of things. But if you had an animal, you spend quality time with an animal that probably like loves you unconditionally, and then you go outside twice a day to walk it, which I love to say that's what people do, but there's actually a huge rate of obese dogs in America and dogs going on insulin. Which is,
I think
you use Ozempic.
Yeah, no, God, please no.
But on that note, because obviously we don't want people to get pets and then not look after them. But I think if somebody's lonely and they struggle with people relationships for whatever reason and do like animals and will care for the animal, that can be just as good. But I can't have dogs because my kids are allergic to dogs. So we've got a fish tank and all the fish died except the pleco. So we've got this huge pleco. Apparently they live for hundreds of years, so I think he's going to outlive us. But it's so relaxed because he's there in his fish tank and we just sit and watch him, and he kind of comes out sometimes and looks at us. So, and he's very low maintenance.
Yeah.
So if you get a fish tank, get some fish. Make sure you've got a pleco in it because they grow big.
Yeah, love it. I mean, I would definitely say, like, even if you are lonely and you did get something like a dog and you love the dog, like, anytime I've looked after dogs for people and you take them out, you just find that other people just talk to you, or you go to a dog park and you actually start getting more social connection just as a proxy of having a dog and going out more and going to dog parks and stuff.
That's so true. I know so many people in my area as like Rex's mum. And it's not a child, it's a dog.
Yeah.
No idea their actual name. Know all about the dog.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I love that.
Sorry to interrupt. Just a quick ask. If you are enjoying this podcast, we do ask if you would go and hit that subscribe button, because our goal is to be able to help all of you guys become body smart. And the way we can do that is by getting better guests on, more experts. And the bigger this podcast gets, the more guests we can get on.
So we've talked a lot today about like the 6 pillars, and you have talked about medication being an important element that can come in, but actually understanding what you can do for yourself is really empowering. And one of the projects you're working on at the moment is an education program for women. Is that around these 6 pillars?
Well, it's going to be around all aspects, including, when, to seek hormone therapy and to be an expert patient almost if you've got symptoms. It's with University College London, led by Professor Joyce Harper, who's a reproductive scientist there. And it's being done really well. We're using focus groups. We're getting key women's organisations from all aspects, because we don't want this again to be healthy women who, already have access to the best healthcare. We want it to be for all women. And it's not going to be quick. It's not going to be out next week because we're going to do this properly, but it's going to be about what women feel is missing and how we can bridge the gap and provide that education. Groups, probably in group settings. And again, that's a social thing if you're in groups. Yeah.
I think that's really important what you said about being an expert patient, because I think there's a lot of hesitancy for women to ask for what they want when they go and see a doctor. I know I feel like that, even though I love doing my research, and I go in, I'm like, right, this is what I want. And I sit there and they say something and I go, okay then. And I walk out really annoyed with myself that I didn't ask for what I want.
It's health advocacy, isn't it? And whilst we're doing really well with women's health at the moment, with raising awareness, and more GPs are prescribing hormone treatments for women, and that's a positive thing when it's needed and it's helping, that's really positive. But I still now have women coming to see me week in, week out saying that their doctor absolutely dismissed their symptoms, made them feel so small that they were making a fuss over a symptom that was a really serious symptom. And it's actually also female doctors. I've had experience with it as well, because you in your mind think, well, that must be the male doctors, and it's not always the case. It's not always older male, it can be younger male doctors, female doctors. I've heard all the stories. So I think until we've got better education of doctors as well, and women to be proactive and knowledgeable, because that is empowering, I think we've still got a lot of work to do. I'm working with the British Menopause Society on a tool for doctors as well. So we are trying very hard to educate GPs.
And you mentioned the word empowerment there, and there was actually a study came out this week, you were saying, the empowerment model for managing menopause. Yeah,
and so that has come out just very recently in The Lancet. It's a series of articles. Most of them are reviews of what we understand to be the best practice management of menopause. And then there's an opinion article that is saying that we may well now, possibly because of the way women are accessing information, we may be over-medicalising menopause. And that has not been well received by women. It certainly hasn't been well received by women. I've seen, since this publication came out, saying, well, that's dismissing my suffering because I am suffering. So why are you saying it's over-medicalised? I need help. So I think it's a very complex time to be working in the field of menopause, because many women need help. Most women don't need bucket loads of help. All women would benefit from help with lifestyle approaches. Some women do incredibly well with HRT in terms of menopause symptoms. Some women don't do well. Some women can't have HRT because they've got a history of complex health issues, cancers. We need to be inclusive. It's a bit like, this sort of the social, we want everybody. We don't just want higher social classes to have access to health. We want everybody to have access to health. And at the moment, there's a feeling that some women are accessing information that is implying that actually if they just take HRT forever, they'll never have to do exercise. They'll never have to do all those other things. They'll never get dementia. They'll never get heart disease as long as they take HRT. And that is not correct, not based on science. But then the articles are suggesting that, because women are being led to believe that HRT is going to prevent disease, that we're over-medicalising menopause. It's messy at the moment. It's a messy time.
Is there other sort of natural remedies that women can do going through menopause? Is there any supplements like vitamin D or anything that's recommended?
So beyond lifestyle, there are some supplements that can help smooth out symptoms if symptoms are mild. But if you've got severe sweats all night, you're not sleeping, you're under stress, if you've also got total wipeout course going on in your life, you're getting divorced, divorce is common in midlife, right? The elderly relatives, bereavements, we've had a pandemic. If you've got all that going on and you feel like, your life is imploding, you need help. And it doesn't help those women who are really suffering to be told that menopause is being over-medicalised. It kind of almost risks giving the impression to some doctors that they can again dismiss women.
Yeah.
So it's really complicated.
Yeah.
And I want women to be empowered. I don't want women to think that if they take HRT, they'll prevent every disease, because that's not correct. That's a misinformed narrative. Women with breast cancer are being led to believe that they should take HRT by some medical sources. That's unsafe. So that's wrong. But that's also different from saying we're over-medicalising it, because some women do really well with HRT. And the women who don't do well with it, we need to provide them with more support, hence through self-empowerment and better GP education.
I think if we all could bring it back to empowerment, then it's about education and choice, isn't it? Because if every woman knew, right, these are the options available to me, these 6 pillars I can take concrete action on, and I've got the option in medicine, and I'm going to choose which of those things I can do right now. That's empowerment. But saying, oh, no, that's too much, or you shouldn't do that, or you don't have time for this, that's taking the power out of the hands of the woman, isn't it?
But also misinformation is disempowering.
Yes.
And there's a lot
everywhere.
of misinformation around. I mean, that's across society, because that's what social media is.
But it starts to enable people as well, which is something that, we always try and very much like cut the BS on, and we do it in an empathetic and compassionate way, or we try our very best to in that sense. But, when people are saying, hey, well, it's your thyroid, it's menopause, it's this, and like people then just latch on and be like, well, that's the reason why I feel the way I do, or that's the reason I can't see the success I want. And it's like, it could be, but like, how about looking at, the whole picture and, actually just focusing on that one problem, and then just listening to that one problem, and almost, as we were saying a bit earlier, getting confirmation bias. It disempowers you, because you become almost like a victim to that
And then
belief.
there's only one way out rather than lots of options. Yeah.
And then when you get that treatment, you can get a placebo effect, actually, because you feel like you're doing something in it. But then people come to me and they go, well, I did feel better, and then now I don't. And so it's disempowering to be given misinformation.
So what would your advice be to somebody that's listening that does feel like a bit overwhelmed with all this information everywhere? Where should they take their information from?
So first of all, if your life has literally collapsed, fallen apart, you need to look carefully about what's going on in every aspect of your life, because it is almost never just one single thing. Even hormones, it's, I see patients who have a complete overnight menopause and they don't have any symptoms, some of them. So it's not like you always get symptoms. I've seen people who have their thyroid removed, their thyroid goes completely flat, and if their thyroid tests are terrible, they actually feel okay.
Oh, really?
Because the rest of your body can kind of
like lean in,
balance for a while. I mean, you will get symptoms, but if everything's fallen apart, there's usually lots of different things going on. With social media and how people should access information, if you see something from a source, no matter how glossy, no matter how reputable it appears, cross-check your facts, okay? Don't just cross-check your facts through echo chambers of the same people on social media who all chat to each other, because they're all in the same echo chamber. Cross-check your facts, looking outside social media. You can look at the responsible organisations related to your condition. So there's the British Menopause Society, the North American Menopause Society. There's brilliant Verity PCOS that looks after PCOS. There's endometriosis societies. There's really good societies for premenstrual disorders. In America, it's the IAPMD Global, and in the UK, it's NAPS PMS. So actually, if you Google reputable organisation for my condition.
So that's what you would, because I'm just trying to think like, hey, I've just watched this TikTok video or Instagram reel about this condition, and then it's like, oh, I've been given this advice. Like my next step after that needs to be go to Google.
Yeah, and it shouldn't just be a website that's somebody selling a product and you can't quite get what their credentials are. Often it's very difficult to tell. If people send me things and they go, "Is this real?" And I look and I go, I can't tell what even the qualifications are. There was a person who said they were a hormone expert, and they actually were an osteopath. And they weren't a hormone expert. It wasn't correct, but they had absolutely hundreds of thousands of followers, and it looked like it was the real deal. So you have to go to organisations that are ideally national organisations, and it isn't always easy. I understand how difficult it is. And at the moment, for women in particular, with women's health, it's difficult. But never just get all your facts or what you think are facts from one source.
Yeah. And the other thing that I think is really difficult is what we were saying earlier. Even if you know how to read a research paper, unless you know where that sits in the context of the rest of the evidence, it's very easy to prove or disprove one theory with one paper. So
absolutely,
that's also not even the answer. You can't just go and search PubMed.
And that happens a lot on social media. So there was an article that's often quoted from Arizona saying HRT prevents dementia. But the study was done on women who were covered by a particular health insurance in America at a time in the early 2000s when no one was getting HRT, because there was a study that stopped everyone from getting HRT in the early 2000s. And we won't go there. That was a bad past. No one could get HRT. The study was flawed. So these women who were given HRT, and they were given a newer form of HRT, they had zero health risks, because no one in America got any HRT at all during that decade after 2002, unless they had no blood pressure, no family history, no diabetes, their weight was healthy, they didn't have a history of cancer, they didn't have they had healthy lifestyles, and they were all white middle class. And so they were at very low risk of getting any cardiovascular disease, and the biggest risk factor for dementia is linked with cardiovascular disease. So it was a skewed group, and it was published in a small journal. Of course, it was an interesting observation because they were using a newer form of HRT, and it made us think maybe we should do studies looking to see if this form of HRT, if we do a bigger randomised trial, shows reduction in dementia. But all the other data we have from every other study that we have that's actually randomised control or a good quality cohort study actually suggests either no effect on dementia or an increased risk with some of the older style HRTs. So this was an interesting observation, the need for more research, but it's being touted as proof that HRT, it's one study. So if you look at the meta-analyses or, the bigger review articles, you see that, and they are utilised, that all the data are utilised when we give what we call international consensus guidance from the major menopause societies. None of the major menopause societies say HRT prevents dementia, and yet there are people on social media saying, yes, it definitely prevents it. You should take it. Even if you don't think you need it, take it and it'll prevent dementia.
So with HRT, because I still know there is definitely, when I speak to some women who maybe aren't that much on social media, there's still a big stigma around being scared. Oh, I don't want to take HRT, like it's
don't want to mess with my body.
Yeah, well, not even that. Just like it could give me cancer, or there is a worry still, I think.
And that comes from the original study. So the HRT to treat menopause symptoms in that phase of the menopause transition when symptoms are problematic is usually around between 2 and 10 years. In relatively younger women, the risks are very low, and you have to balance risks with benefits. But if you are if you do have severe symptoms and you can't live your life, the benefits are definitely outweighing the risks. So the risks are small for young women. The risks, it appeared with breast cancer, for example, are in for longer durations of treatment in women over the age of 50. And a lot of women get most of their symptoms in their late 40s, early 50s. So no reputable menopause society says that HRT is dangerous in use for symptoms. If you're talking about preventing dementia, you're saying take it forever. And actually, as you've taken it for 10 years, 20 years, that's when the risks start.
Right.
And that was borne out.
And so that's actually something that I don't think is talked about, HRT. You don't get it at 47 and then stay on it forever.
Well, that's not in any recommended guidance, not for all women. There are certain women who, we say there's no time limit. You take HRT whilever your benefits are outweighing your risks. And we have to look at risks. There are different risks. Lifestyle impacts breast cancer risks. So if you're drinking excessively, if you very overweight, those, and you're not doing any exercise, those are bigger risk factors for breast cancer than HRT.
So you've kind of got to pick your battles, haven't you?
Yeah, so it's about, again, we talk about individualised care, there's no time limit. If I've got patients in their 60s and 70s, they say, I'm not stopping it, I feel amazing. I've tried to stop it 3 times and I don't want to stop it. Most women can stop it. That's fine. It's about using it for symptoms sensibly. That's different from saying, it doesn't matter what your symptoms are, you should be taking it to prevent disease, because that's not borne out by evidence. It's not rocket science, but it's just there's so much confusion on social media because so many people are saying things that are not based on consensus guidance because they're using one particular study or something like that.
So always the advice is just double check with a reputable society.
But actually HRT, just to be clear, is based on the NICE guidelines and all of the sort of European and American guidelines we have. It's the first line treatment for severe menopausal symptoms. For menopause, if menopause is causing you symptoms that are stopping you living your life, you should be on HRT.
Yeah, 1,000%.
And just, I know it's kind of in the public sphere that you have had your own experience with breast cancer and menopause yourself. What do you take any HRT?
No, I don't. So I had breast cancer 12 years ago. I'm an endocrinologist. I deal with hormones. That's my whole career. I also worked at Christie Hospital in Manchester, which is one of the cancer hospitals from, I think the first time I worked there was 1993. And I went back and worked there for several years in the early 2000s, looking after women with breast cancer and helping them manage menopause without HRT. So when I got breast cancer, which I didn't think I would ever get because nobody ever thinks they're going to get it, especially at the age of 42 with 2 young children, I thought, I think, and it was estrogen receptor positive. I thought, right, I better go into menopause now then. I thought, great, because I've helped so many women. let's see what my experience is, and I've helped a lot of women and I knew what I was doing. So I had to go on a chemical menopause where they gave me injections to completely shut down my ovaries. I was pre-menopausal. I was, regular periods, normal. And so I had injections and then I had a drug called tamoxifen, which is a drug that blocks estrogen.
I've heard of that before because bodybuilders take that after they come off testosterone.
Yes.
As a post-cycle therapy.
Yes, yeah. So, and a lot of women don't like tamoxifen because they say it causes menopause symptoms, but I think it's because the treatment that they're having for the cancer is causing the menopause symptoms. But and it was very interesting because I did get, dramatic hot sweats and flushes. And I got emotional. I'm not an emotional person. My family think I'm strange because I don't tend to cry. But I did get emotional. And it lasted a few months. And I used the lifestyle toolkit that I talk about in my book, which is based on a lot about what we've talked about today. I did everything from, my great group of my social network, but I did lots of exercise. I tried to eat healthily. I tried to manage my sleep because my sleep was bad. I got all the symptoms, but I thought, well, I've got the symptoms. That means my estrogen's low. That's really good because my cancer won't be able to be surviving because breast cancer can come back many years later, you see. So, it really is quite important to manage that cancer well. in those early years, and that's why you can be given tamoxifen for decades sometimes, or other what we call adjuvant endocrine therapies, because it's a naughty cancer. Many cancers, if you survive 5 years, you're cured, but that's not doesn't happen. Olivia Newton-John, I think, died of breast cancer 20-something years after she was originally diagnosed, because it came back later. So I knew that it was really important. I thought menopause was my new best friend. And I was fine. I was fine. And I'm not dismissing anyone who had more severe symptoms. And actually, there's a new treatment coming out for menopause, sweats, flushes symptoms, the vasomotor symptoms, which hopefully at some point, it's not going to have a license for breast cancer initially, but hopefully it or one of the similar drugs being developed will, to help women who have severe menopause symptoms who can't have HRT. But there are a number of medications that can be used. I didn't use any medications, but a lot of that was because I was an empowered patient. And that was why I wrote my book, because I thought, actually, if every woman could understand what I understood, some women will need HRT, some women will need other treatments if they can't have HRT, but a lot of women will do better with that knowledge. And I maintain that, and I think my book will be around for a very long time, because what I've done for the last 30 years is what's in the book. And
Can you share the book? Can you hold it up and share the title?
It's called The Complete Guide to the Menopause. I got approached. I wasn't going to write it, and then a patient came up to me and she said, she was crying actually, because she said she'd been fobbed off for 10 years, and she said, I can't believe you just said in 5 minutes everything that makes the last 10 years of my life, it makes sense. And she said, will you write a book? I've got a contact. So anyway, and then it happened. Yeah, and I thought, well, actually, it'll help people.
And where can people get that?
You can get it through. It's actually in a lot of high street bookstores, Waterstones and places like that. But you can get it online through all of the online bookstores. Amazon, yes, you can get it on Amazon.
Okay,
so,
amazing.
And younger women, it helps them prepare for what will come, because you adapt your lifestyle. But I was empowered, and I was fine, and I'm not scared of getting osteoporosis, because I make sure I get enough calcium in my diet, enough vitamin D. I do strength training. I do walking. I manage stress. Stress is bad for osteoporosis. I try and do all the things that are going to protect my bones. But frailty is one of the biggest problems in the elderly who break their bones, because if your legs are weak and you fall, you're more likely to break. So keeping strong. So I'm never going to stop walking.
Yep.
So I'm not frightened of getting cardiovascular disease, because I do cardio, and I try and keep my diet as healthy as possible. I try to minimise the ultra-processed foods, all of that. I don't smoke, don't take drugs. I'm empowered because I know how profound those strategies are in maintaining long-term health. What I worry about is a lot of younger women, they're terrified of all these diseases. They think after menopause they're going to just get all these diseases and die and shrivel up unless they do whatever that website's telling them to do.
I also think it's quite enlightening to hear someone have a positive experience of menopause, because the narrative is very much about it's going to be awful, you're going to have all these awful symptoms, you're going to have brain fog. But actually, the people who are doing okay aren't talking about it, because they're just having their life.
And also the media like bad news stories.
Right.
You don't tend to see much in the way of people saying they've had a great menopause experience. It's not... And look, I'm not saying anybody's saying they have a great life experience. We live in a very stressful world. So, people can be patronised if I say, well, I didn't have a great menopause. I just went through menopause and I carried on. And, I had breast cancer causing mine. I went back to work. I noticed a bit of brain fog we know that brain fog is very common in the early stage, and it settles down for the vast majority of women. Brain fog is not a precursor for dementia. It happens in many women. It's like it happens after pregnancy, baby brain. It's a hormone change thing.
Actually, I think that's another enlightening, hopeful thing, is all of these symptoms are not, once you start going into perimenopause, that's then your life for the rest of your life. It's a season of your life.
And the older women I see in my clinics, for lots of different reasons, are the most empowered women I see. I actually feel for younger women. I have several young, young adult nieces and my daughter, and it's tough for them. I think it's really tough for them. And women in midlife at the moment are very confused because of all the media confusion and social media. But the older women who are not bothered, they're all great,
living their best life.
They're all going, what's all this fuss about? And look, there's a lot more stress around now. So I'm not at all dismissing the difficulties that women have. And that's why HRT can be so helpful. But I think making it doom and gloom is not helping anyone. It's not empowering anyone.
Yeah. I think that's got to be the theme of the episode: empowerment, knowledge, positivity, really.
Yeah.
So if anybody wants to find you on social media or on your website, where should they go?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram as the.hormone.doc. I try. I do a lot of other sort of medical work as well. So I try and post as much. I do lots of Instagram stories and then I post every few days. I'm on Twitter. It's at Annice Mukherjee. Instagram's the.hormone.doc. I do have a website called Hormone Wise, which is really just a little bit of background into different medical conditions that I manage. And that's it, really. Yeah.
Fantastic. Oh, we probably could have talked all day. There's so many questions we would still love to ask.
There is so much to talk about.
So thank you so much for making the journey down. And I'm sure our listeners have got a lot out of today's episode.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks.